Hello everyone and welcome to another video with Coach B from MasterYourChess.com. In this video we're going to take a look at static and dynamic weaknesses in the middle game and how to use those for your advantage. A static advantage refers to a long-term weakness in the opponent's camp. It could be a weak pawn, a lack of space, material deficit, a hole in the opponent's pawn structure, or any other weakness that will be there for a longer period of time. A dynamic weakness refers to a temporary weakness that can be taken advantage of right away. It can include a king that is not castled or being behind in development. A strong chess player needs to be able to identify these weaknesses and act on them appropriately. Too many times beginners have a preferred style of play. They might like dynamic games where they just attack, or a static positional play where they slowly try to improve their position and take advantage of long-term weaknesses. It's critically important to know if the position demands a static or dynamic play from you, and this is what we're going to focus on in this video. Going through a series of Grandmaster games, we will learn how to identify those weaknesses and see how to take advantage of them. So let's get started. First, we're going to take a look at a game that was played in 1990 at the National Open between Strenswilk and Silman. And I'm going to fast forward and stop at the critical moments of the game. So the game starts with e4 and then the c5 Sicilian by Silman. And this is the position that was reached after 17 moves. And here Silman captured the bishop on b3, from which white responded with a takes b3. However, as he reflects on his game, he was considering that probably much better would have been to move the queen to c6. The problem with knight takes on b3 and a takes b3 is that the rook now has access to the a4 square where he can put pressure on the e4 pawn. And it's probably not a good idea to develop the opponent's piece. However, the game continued with queen to c6, rook to a4, rook f to c8, rook to c4, and now queen to a6. Now this move was an actual setup by black, and white fell right into the temptation, because he continued with taking on c8, and after black captured back, white captured the queen, ruining black's pawn structure and thinking that he is better. Actually, coming back, much better would have been knight takes e4, rook takes c4, b takes c4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, bishop takes b2, queen g6 check, king to f8, the queen will capture on h6 with check, bishop to g7, queen takes g5, and after queen takes c4, white is a little bit better because black has a vulnerable king. But coming back, after rook takes c8, rook takes c8, queen takes a6, b takes a6, and rook to a1, white has a better pawn structure, which will be a static advantage. However, let's analyze the dynamics of this position as well. So let's carefully analyze the imbalances of this position. We've already mentioned that white has a much better pawn structure, and he also has an active rook, which is targeting black's weak pawns. For black, on the other hand, white's king is in a corner behind three pawns that are going to have a hard time trying to move. Therefore, the white king will have a hard time getting activated, and he might run into the risk of being stuck into that last rank if black will control the 7th rank with the rook. Black's rook is also active, and if the white knight will move, it's going to be able to take the pawn on c2, controlling that 7th rank. The tripled e pawns are not as bad as they seem, especially the pawn on e6, which supports the square d5, which will allow the knight to go there. Once it reaches that square, it threatens to capture white's knight on c3, and then opening the c-file, activating his rook. Also, after the knight moves on d5, the black bishop on g7 is going to become active, putting pressure on the pawn on b2 and the queen side. While white's bishop, it's pretty much attacking nothing on the g3 to be a diagonal. And the last thing, if we look at the pawns, black is a pawn up. Looking at these imbalances, we could see that this will be a battle between white's structural superiority versus black's enormous advantage in dynamics. I also want to note here that all black's pieces are serving an active dynamic function. His king can defend the key points in its camp, while the rook, knight, and bishop will join forces and tear down the queen side. White's pieces, on the other hand, are all over the place and aren't working together at all. And the game continued with knight to d5, and then rook takes on a6. Coming back, White's other option is not much better, taking on e4. After rook takes c2, h4, g takes h4, bishop takes h4, bishop to d4, rook takes a6, king to f7, rook to a4, and e5, black is in much better shape here. Coming back, probably the best option would be knight takes d5, e takes d5, and then pawn to c3 and rook to c6. But even in this case, black stands much better. So coming back, in the game, white took on a6, and now black continued with king to f7. Making a good use of the king. The e6 pawn is protected, rook takes e6 is avoided, and black finally is ready to put pressure on the knight on c3. The game continued with rook takes on a7 and bishop takes on c3. Coming back, here black needs to be careful. Taking with the knight on c3 would be a mistake because after b takes c3, rook takes c3, white can play rook to c7 here, or black could be in trouble now due to the connected passed pawns. So coming back, black responded correctly by taking with the bishop on c3, from which white responded with b takes c3, rook takes c3, pawn to h4, rook takes on c2, h takes g5, h takes g5, king to g1, and now pawn to e3. And now the tripled e pawns show that they could also be used effectively in a dynamic way. The game continued with f takes on e3, knight takes e3, bishop to d6, rook takes g2, king to h1, rook e2, bishop takes e7, king to g6, bishop to c4, g4, bishop takes e3, and then rook takes e3. And now black has a winning endgame. And I'm just going to fast forward to the moves so you could see how this game ended. And here black ended up in a winning Lucena position. And after promoting the pawn, white resigned. And as we've seen in this game, always make sure to know what imbalances both you and your opponent can make use of. Dynamics can beat statics, and statics can beat dynamics. It's up to each player to judge which is more favorable in each particular position. Another thing is that we want to make sure that all of our pieces are working together to a particular goal. And lastly, I know that we've been taught that double and isolated and even triple pawns are bad, but even those pawns can sometimes be used in a dynamic way. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next game. If you liked my video, don't forget to subscribe, and I encourage you to visit my website masterchess.com where you can learn, practice, test, and master your chess knowledge.